We have Java Visualizer up, the website where we can go and insert our Java code and see pictures of the objects and how even primitive type variables get assigned their values. And you also see that we have included here the code for the customer class, the very simple customer class that we started writing. A customer that has one instance variable, the class has one field, the name, and then we also have a main method. What do? We create two customer objects. We are referencing them through two variables, the Alice variable and the Bob variable, and then through Alice and Bob again, we are giving a value to the name field of each of those objects. Now we're going to modify this example in such a way that we actually use a constructor, and also we use the keyword this, the variable this. The purpose is to understand better what does it mean that this is referring to the current object. So let's start by creating a constructor for this class. How do we do that? The constructor doesn't have a return value. We don't need to put anything for what the constructor returns or not, as we do with methods. And it also always has the same name as the class. Now, it may take arguments as well. It may take no arguments, or it may take some. And here we will want the constructor to take a name as an argument. And I'm sure this line will be familiar to you. Many times we will write this.name becomes equal to name. Again, what does it mean? Whenever we write name inside the constructor, we are referring to the argument. This.name refers to the field inside the customer class. So what line 7 does is that it assigns the value of the name argument to the variable of the customer, to the customer field. Then we can also modify, we have to modify the way that we create the Alice and Bob objects, and we can provide the names as arguments to the constructor. And for this reason, we no longer need these lines of code. We simplify our code. Let's then visualize the execution of this code. And before we do that, you may actually want to take a piece of paper and draw what you expect to see and when you expect to see everything happen on your own. So the very first line of the main method is line 11, where we are actually calling the constructor of the customer class. How do we do that? This is done because we are creating a new customer object on line 11, and we provide as argument the string Alice. Now, if you see the picture, you will see several variables. Let's make sure we understand what they are. When we call the constructor, there are two variables that are related to the constructor. One is the argument. One is the parameter of the constructor. And this is the name that you see inside, right below this. When we call the customer constructor with Alice, it means that we give the value Alice to that parameter, to the name parameter. This is why you see name referencing Alice. The second thing is that this variable is referencing the current object. Remember what we were saying, that this always references the current object. What is the current object here? It is the customer object that is being created. So you see this referencing a customer instance, a customer object, and what will any customer instance have? It will have a name variable. And since we have not done anything to that yet, it is initialized by default to the value null. So this is referencing that new customer instance. Excellent. What happens next? The next thing that happens is the line 6 that is inside the constructor, which says this.name becomes equal to name. Give the value that was passed to the parameter to the customer field name. How do we see that? Again, you see this is the value of the parameter. The value of the customer field name is still null. After the execution of line 6, now the value of the name field is also Alice, so it is referencing the same object. The constructor completes its job, it returns, and therefore the Alice variable is now referencing the newly created customer object. Here it is the customer instance, which has as a parameter, as a value for the name field, Alice, the value Alice. Now with line 12, exactly the same thing will happen, exactly the same order of operations. What will happen? Again, on line 12 we are making a call to the constructor customer, and we are providing Bob as argument. So name will be the local variable, again, the parameter of the customer constructor will now have the value Bob. That's what we pass to the constructor. And the second variable that is of interest when we're inside the constructor is the this variable. What is now this referencing? It is referencing the current object, which is the new customer object that is being created. That's why it is a reference to a new customer instance. Again, we have done nothing to the name field of that customer instance, so it is by default initialized to the null value because its type is a string. What will happen at the next step? And the next step is line 6 again. With line 6, the name field of this new customer instance will be given a value. Which value? The value of the parameter. The value of the parameter is Bob, so it will also be referencing exactly the same string object. So after the constructor returns for a second time, after our second call, now the picture will be that we have a new customer instance and the Bob customer variable is referencing that new customer instance.